Hello, constituents. We have an exciting and informative show for you today. We are going to get into some incredible details about what's happening with the disastrous leadership of the Michigan State Police, the department that they pulled the troopers, and 98% of the troopers said these guys got to go. They have no confidence in them. Of course, the governor says, no, I'm going to keep them. They take care of my dirty laundry, so I'm not going to throw them out. Well, we need to get and drill down to why the giant majority of the troopers, 98%, say these guys, we have no confidence and they have to go. So we have Attorney Jim Fett here, and he has represented a lot of the retired officers. And the reason it's tough to represent them when they're working is the retribution. I mean, this team is known for retribution beyond belief against these troopers. So he's got a number of the retired troopers, and I think one that is current. And you're not going to believe the story of this department, from the Gasper, who was the old leader, and now we have James Grady, who's the new leader of the Michigan State Police. I mean, there's more issues than you could possibly imagine with this department, more than I think any other department the nation has ever had. So with that, I'd like to bring on Jim Fett. And Jim, if you could just kind of inform us about, some of the background and some of the garbage that these poor troopers have had to deal with from this administration and from this leadership.
Well, one of the major issues is that the troopers, and probably a lot of the sergeants, don't feel that Grady or Brimacombe has their back. And that is a terrible thing for any law enforcement agency if the folks that are out there patrolling don't feel that command staff has their back. And there's been many instances of that. One relates to a Brian Keeley, who was a detective sergeant out in Grand Rapids working with the feds. He and several other federal officers were chasing a known felon who had a warrant out for his arrest. And as they were chasing him, unfortunately for the felon, Detective Sergeant Keeley hit the supposed victim and he was killed. The director took that opportunity to explain how, as an African-American father and person, he sympathizes with the victim's family. He actually went and visited with them, and he suspended Keeley before 4 hours were over. You could imagine the reaction of all troopers, black, white, Hispanic, or anything else, when your director comes out and takes the criminal side against you. That was one instance, okay? But that was very impactful. Another instance, of course, is when the number two in command, which would be Amy Brimacombe, is again taking sides against troopers that were charged with excessive force with an arrestee who was completely out of control. She caused charges to be brought locally in, I think it was Shiawassee County. The local prosecutor, the local judge, the local magistrate didn't want to bring the charges because they were frankly bogus. And then to add insult to injury, this fellow was resisting arrest, later sued the department, and Amy Brimacombe went to bat for them and secured a $999,000 settlement for this. He's a bad actor. There's no question about that. But that happened in 6 months, and that's because she leaned on the state police to cut a deal within 6 months and pay out almost $1 million.
And I understand the reason that it was almost $1 million is if it goes over $1 million, there's a number of precautions and safeguards that jump into place to make sure mischief wasn't going on. So she came in at under $1 million. I also understand that there was a relationship. She knew some of the people connected to this bad actor. And so, I mean, this is the kind of thing that we're seeing constantly with this leadership. It's not the troopers. The troopers are out working, doing a great job, but they have this leadership that just, it's like almost a month can't go by with some kind of rotten corruption, some kind of, underhanded behavior, undermining the officers as you're outlining. But continue.
There's a lot of dissatisfaction with Director Grady also because I'll just be polite, less than a stellar career before he was appointed to be the director. And that was widely known throughout the agency.
And not only that, I believe both of them, Grady and Brimacombe, leapfrogged a lot of other individuals who were, by anything on paper you look at, way more highly qualified than these two. And I know also that the governor's huge push, and I've got a quote here from her previous Gasper, that the agency is too white and too male. and they're wanting at least some quotas put in. It's this kind of thing that really upsets people. They want the best. And I know that the Michigan State Police recruits the best. They're not interested in, what you look like. It's how good a trooper are you going to be. And that's always been the case with the Michigan State Police. They were renowned to be one of the best forces of any kind in the nation in the past. But now we have all of this stuff where they can't seem to focus on doing the best job for the people of the state of Michigan, creating the best force. They have all of this DEI woke stuff that they're throwing in there that is why people are losing confidence in the department. We should be focusing on, we should pursue, we should be hiring absolutely the best on a merit system alone.
And that hasn't been the case for a long time. And despite the blatant illegalities that have gone on since at least the 90s, I've been litigating with the state police since 1993. Okay. I've taken them to trial and we've caught them red-handed with blatant out and out racial and to a great lesser extent, gender preferences. They were illegal then, they're illegal now, but yet the state police and the policymakers continue with. At first, it was called affirmative action. Then they were remedying underrepresentation of minorities. Now we have the DEI. So this is not, unfortunately, a new thing. But one thing that can be said is that the state police, historically, in every employment decision that they were making, was somehow based on race. And that was in hiring, they had different cutoff scores. In promotions, they had different cutoff scores for white guys and something else far lower for everybody else. Whether you got to go to a conference, every facet of employment at the state police has been affected by, well, let's just call it what is social engineering by people who don't know what they're doing.
Well, one thing I would disagree with is they don't know what they're doing. Oh, they know very well what they're doing. The Democrats have always been pushing this kind of social engineering. Now, of course, they always exempt themselves. I always talk to these liberals, say, well, if you want to have a quota, start with you, if you're one of these white liberals and you resign your position, oh, no, me, my kids, my family, we all want their preferences, but we want everybody else to be judged by the color of their skin. This is the way that they think. This is the way they operate. And back in 2006, the state of Michigan passed a ballot proposal overwhelmingly to get rid of and make illegal affirmative action. But with the Democrats, does illegality matter for the Michigan State Police, which are to enforce the law? No, they're busting and breaking the law. They have been for ever since 2006. The U.S. Supreme Court just ruled again, you're not to be using taxpayer dollars for affirmative action. And they wanted at least a 15% quota just recently for the Michigan State Police. And this is absolutely illegal. They were doing this to many of the Asian students who were applying to Ivy League schools. They were saying you have to have this massive standard above everybody else to get in. That went to the Supreme Court and it was ruled unconstitutional because we should be a culture that is about the best, about merit, and one of the probably worst lawbreakers in the state of Michigan is the very organization responsible for enforcing law, and that's the Michigan State leadership and the governor who appoints these people.
I couldn't have said it better. But let me just tell you this. What kind of tickles me was when I get a phone call from an acquaintance, a lawyer. Most of my lawyer friends are very liberal, and that's just the nature of my profession. But they all are supportive of DEI and everything. But when I get that phone call, it's usually, Jim, I'm a big supporter of affirmative action or DEI or whatever, but my brother couldn't get into Michigan, or my sister's husband couldn't get promoted at, I won't say the names, but that tickles me. But this has been going on for a long time. And you pointed out that the Supreme Court just ruled for the Asian students in that Harvard case. But one thing I want your audience to know, and that is affirmative action preferences have been illegal in employment since at least 1993, at least. Okay. And so this is not a novel concept that you can't discriminate against the white guys in employment. That's been the lay of the law since at least 1993 and their Supreme Court opinion. So,
the most disgusting part of it, of all to me is just like you outlined, and I've talked to these people too. It's usually your white liberals who are the biggest advocates of this, provided it's everybody they don't know. And why do they advance it? Because they're virtue signaling about, look how great I am because I advance this. Well, sir, ma'am, how about you? Oh, no, not for me. Well, how about your family and your sons and daughters and brothers and sisters? Oh, no, not for us. We're exempt because we're advocating for the program. So see, this shouldn't apply to us. It should apply to some kid who, the dad's in prison, the mom's on cocaine, and he works his way up out of a garbage can and applies for a job. He studied and worked. He should suffer, but not us, who usually, most of these liberals are well-heeled, come from great backgrounds, have all the green privilege in the world, but when it comes to them actually doing what they say, they're total rotten hypocrites. That's what is the most disgusting thing to me of all. If you really believe in this, start with yourself. If Grady or any of these, the governor, anybody that believes in this, start with your family, particularly for these white liberals. It just disgusts me how hypocritical they are.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the governor's regulations during the pandemic. We all had to comply with pretty unreasonable requirements, yet she's ignoring all these rules. She's having a nice time, and I don't begrudge her that, but she's with all her friends at a closed bar partying when everybody's supposed to be isolated from each other. And then she's flying to see a relative who's ill, even though she supposedly outlawed that. So another perfect example.
You're absolutely correct. It's a hallmark of the Democrat Party is hypocrisy. And you're right. It starts with the governor saying that you have to social limit. I believe it was you're not be more than 6 people in a restaurant. And then she's partying. She's got 18 people. They say, oh, you can't take your motorboat out. You can take a canoe, but don't take a motorboat out. Yet her husband's the first guy calling in, trying to impose himself to get his motorboat out. I mean, just absolute hypocrisy. This is such a hallmark with them that I'm not surprised they're doing this with affirmative action too. Oh, we need to do this to reach these goals and accept anything to do with us, our families, our friends. Oh no, we're all exempt because we're virtue signalers. So yeah, it just doesn't seem to end with them. It's just par for the course.
You know, it's really ironic and sad. And this was reported in the Detroit Free Press by the fine journalist Paul Egan just yesterday. But the state police long ago hit not only quotas, but they were far in excess of the quotas that they sent. And that's been the case. I have an opinion right here from 1996 that was written by Livingston County Circuit Judge Daniel Burris. And what a fine judge he is. He's retired now. But in 1996, he noted in his opinion that the state police in 1996, long ago, had more representation of African Americans in their police force than were present in the general population. So the law is, once you achieve a representation with your affirmative action goals, you are to stop. You can't do any more of that, even if you think it's a really good thing. You can't do it. This has been illegal, what they've been doing since prior to 1993. And I tried that case. And I had the statistics. I had experts testify. And so the state police continued to do that. And the last 2 directors, Gasper and Grady, actually have done worse in terms of, quote, diversity than their predecessors. And they are using some radical methods to do that. I think I've said before that under Grady, it's diversity by all means necessary.
You're right. The numbers actually have imploded among minorities in the Michigan State Police Department. There was just a Free Press article. They had asked me about it on one of the other shows and asked, why is that? I mean, they're pushing this stuff to the nth degree more than ever before, breaking the laws to do it. And I think what it is that they're destroying the morale among all the candidates thinking about going in. And I talked to a guy who went through the entire process. And he passed everything, and they offered him the job, and he just went, no, it seems too toxic. And I think that's with minority candidates, too, just seeing the toxicity where the troopers are so miserable, unhappy that you'll be left to hang out to dry if you do anything that the leadership doesn't like. If you complain about something, even on social media, and they find out, they'll redirect you and they'll put you they can move you from one end of the state to the other, jumping you all over. They could punish you endlessly. And so people are saying, I want out of this thing. And what a shame. I remember when I was a kid and my parents and our whole family was out on a vacation. My dad got pulled over, he was speeding. And this very well-dressed officer, the best dressed officer I'd ever seen, comes up to the car. Just the professionalism was like incredible. And then I can't remember if he gave Dad a ticket or not, but they left. And I go, what kind of police was that? And they said, oh, that's a Michigan State Police. And my mom saying, they are known to be the best in the entire United States. We are so proud of that force. I remember my mom saying that when I was a little kid, and to see what has happened to that department from those days to now, the lack of morale, everybody completely miserable. If they can get out of there, they would, having a hard time recruitment. Their number one goal of recruiting minorities has even done worse, collapsing, all because of this completely disordered governor and her disordered people that she's put in place. Just DEI hires, they leapfrogged everybody else, and this seems to be the number one goal of the department, not public safety, not taking care of the citizens, but their DEI objectives.
Yeah, and the governor really cracks the whip on the directors for this. And this problem is not limited to the state police. The governor's chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer, Poppy Hernandez, that's the governor's right-hand person for DEI, she told Sarah Krebs that Director Grady was to be supported at all costs, and that as a official working for a state official, she had to relearn what is right and wrong. And she was suggesting that Krebs needed to have that same lesson. And that lesson was do whatever it takes to make your boss successful. The program of running roughshod over the Constitution, people's statutory rights, all in the name of diversity, is standard operating procedure. And every director in the state has to bow down to that. And they're held accountable if they don't.
The governor was doing this with healthcare. All of the healthcare population of those who are receiving certain benefits, like back during the COVID, who gets the shot? I gave a lot of floor speeches on this because the Democrats were saying, well, we're not going to give the shot by your risk level. It's where you are in the DEI. So if you live in an apartment, you're low risk. Well, you're in an apartment, so maybe you're going to fit into a DEI category, so you can get a shot over this 90-year-old person who has had bronchitis and pneumonia. We're not going to give it to her because she doesn't fit the DEI. I mean, it seems crazy for any listener out there to go, this is insanity. Yet they were vocal. It was this social index. Determine whether you're going to stay alive or not, depending on your race, your gender, all of this garbage that has nothing to do with your risk level. Were you in a high risk pool, regardless of your skin color? That should be the determination. And all of this other stuff, how much money do you earn? Well, you didn't earn that much money, but you're low risk, so you get the shot over people who are high. This is what they do in the entire healthcare. They're putting all of the employees through this endless DEI stuff. It is such a huge component of the Democrat Party. And as you described, but when it comes to them, individuals, the hypocrisy knows no bounds. Oh, no, not for us. See, we're advocates of the DEI, so therefore it exempts anyone we know, especially these white liberals. We're exempt from all this. It should apply to everybody but us. And usually they're the well-heeled. They come from privileged backgrounds, and they'll take this out on people who don't have a pot to piss in. But that's the way they roll. I know we're coming to the end of our time here, so I don't want to miss any of the final thoughts you have in terms of where you think things are at, where you think these cases are going, and what direction you think we're headed.
Well, first of all, we've been talking about the notion of diversity. And the state police, that just means race. It doesn't mean gender. It doesn't mean Latinos. It doesn't mean anything but black and white. And that's from the colonel's own mouth. And in terms of what's going on in the state police right now, the director and his minions are flagrantly violating the state and federal constitutions as well as state and federal statutes. What's happening, the state police there's no way they could hit their quota because they have to promote from within. So they just don't have enough black candidates to promote.
You're absolutely correct, except I would, I guess, qualify that and say enforced diversity. I mean, if you have a natural diversity, that's a good thing, but that's not what we're talking about. You're talking about enforced diversity, where they're trying to force numbers. And when you do that, like you described, you reduce morale. And that's demonstrated because it's not only reduced the morale of white troopers, minority troopers aren't wanting to come into this very, very depressive environment created by the governor and created by her leadership team. So I really appreciate your taking the time to be with us today. I appreciate your representing vigorously these officers. They should be allowed to do their jobs effectively. We should be getting the best, the most meritorious candidates we can, supporting them when they're out there doing this tough job. So again, thank you for your work and thank you for being on the show today.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.